want to make a plate on the wheel with a mold and slab, kind of like the jigger in the jigger video we saw with Deborah Schwarzkopf. The first thing you gotta do is pick your mold, and I chose a plate mold here. And you're gonna lock it down onto a bat, a throwing bat, these circular forms with holes in them. And what you're gonna do is just take a little bit of clay once you have it centered on the wheel. You're gonna just carefully smash clay coils underneath here and then clean off the edge here using a rubber rib instead of a metal one, because you don't want to scratch the plaster. So that's nice and locked down. I have made and prepared a slab right here, rolled it out with the rolling pin, making sure that it is no thinner than about 1/2 centimeter. Particularly if you're going to be carving in your foot, you want it the thickness of the height of the foot and the thickness of the plate. So I wouldn't go any thinner than that. I will also show you how to add on a foot if you would like to do that. Okay, so you make your slab, compress it out with your rib, and then we will bring it back over here. Oops. And put it onto the mold. Okay, so just like when we were hand building, you're going to kind of tap it down with your hands and kind of make sure that it's tight to the mold. And you're gonna cut off any excess. Should look like this. Now, cutting off the excess with your wooden potter's thumb tool like this. Holding that potter's thumb really, really steady. All right, and then next, we're going to use our rib, our rubber rib. The yellow one or a blue one is fine. And you're going to take the rib and kind of curve it with your fingers to match the curve of your plate or your bowl. And really compress. I'm pressing pretty hard here. Really compressing this slab onto the mold. It's also important to note that you shouldn't be going full speed for this. There's no need for speed. So once I have this plate slab nice and compressed, we are going to, you can either throw in a foot or you can throw a foot separately and add it on. I will show you in this demo how to kind of carve in a foot. That's what I meant before, sorry. So because my slab is pretty wet, I'm going to take my large meat tool, looks like this, and begin carving off some of this thickness. Coming in and smoothing it out with my rib. It's also important to note that anytime you're trying to make a plate, the wider the foot is, the more stable your plate will be in use. So you can see here, I'm starting to get this little ridge here. That's what I want. So I'm just going to make that a little more distinct. With my potter's thumb. And now all I have to do is take out the interior. So holding my carving tool very, very steady and stopping to pull off all of these little boogers, because those will make your hand waver if you hit them with your tool. So how much you carve away will determine how high your foot is. The more you carve, the higher your foot will be. And you also, the more you carve, the thinner your slab is getting. So that's another thing to kind of keep in mind. You're always trying to balance that. And you can also continue to refine the shape once the slab is leather hard. When I demoed this on last class on Tuesday, I made a couple of these in class, and then I came in, left them on their mold, overnight, loosely wrapped in plastic, and then came in and checked on them the next day, and they're ready to come off their molds without losing shape, which was fantastic. So it takes about 12 to 18 hours to kind of harden up if it's loosely wrapped in plastic. If you leave it without plastic on, obviously that's gonna go a lot faster. So every time you kind of make a refinement with your trimming tool, you're going to want to come in with your rib afterwards to compress what you just did, and it will help clean it up a little bit. Mm-hmm.
The combo soil, the combo clay.
What do you do with it?
Yeah.
Oh, you can throw it,
In red.
yeah, but instead of bunching it up like that, break it into tiny little balls and throw it into the leather hard reclaim.
The leather.
Yeah, because it's still wet. It's really hard to reclaim when there's big chunks. So break all those up into smaller pieces for me. Okay, so when you get to a shape that you kind of like, you probably, and it, especially if you feel like the clay is too wet to continue shaping, that's a good time to be done and wait to let it harden up a little bit. And then when you come and take it off the mold the next day, you can continue trimming, and the clay will be leather hard, so it's going to hold that shape a little better. But hopefully at this stage you should have something that looks a little like this. And you can kind of see the foot I put in there. Okay, we're back the next day, and the plate that we trimmed on the mold yesterday is now leather hard. So coming back the next day, 12 to 18 hours later, with the piece wrapped in plastic, it's now ready to refine trimming, refine this foot, and then take it off and clean up the lip. So again, anytime you have something on the mold on the wheel, there's really no reason to have the wheel going at full speed. If you keep the wheel speed low, that gives you a little more time to react if something goes wrong, if it accidentally pops off or something. So one thing I'm really concerning myself with is I'm looking at my other plates, and if you want to make it a set, you're kind of concerned with matching the thickness of each of your plates. And plates are something you pick up a lot, and so a really heavy plate definitely will have some like weight to it, and that can be, kind of depends on what you want, but if it's a plate you use a lot, you probably want it a little bit lighter. Again, if you go too thick, or sorry, too thin, you run into the potential for that plate to warp in the kiln. So it's always kind of this delicate balance. So I'm just using my carving tools to take a little bit more off. And also to kind of refine this foot a little bit. And then once I get as much off as I think I want, and the foot's just the way I want it, I'm going to come back in with my metal or rubber rib and compress again, because that's making my plate stronger and more able to withstand or mitigate warping. One thing you want to do before you take the plate off the mold is make sure that your foot is actually level. And you can do that really easily by grabbing another bat like this, setting it on top, and gently tapping in the center, and that's gonna help level that foot to make sure that it doesn't sit wonky on the table and it's less likely to warp. If you're concerned about making a set, now is probably a good time to have an example of the other plate that you made that you're trying to match, maybe right in front of you, so you can see this curve on the other plate and be matching that curve as you're making your final refinements. Okay, so it is just the way I want it, this side. So I'm just gonna hit it with the heat gun a little bit to help kind of encourage strength when I pull this baby off. I have my heat gun on low. I really don't want to stress it out too much. Let me show you what it looks like. And I'm keeping the wheel spinning as I am. Anytime I have the heat gun directed towards my work, any wet work, I always want to keep it in motion so one side doesn't get too dry, because that will encourage warping and potentially cracking. take this baby off the mold. And that can be kind of tricky. You really want to make sure that it's not wrapping underneath this corner, because that can be problematic. If you need to, you can always hit it with the air, which I might need to do. So we're over here in the spray booth with the air gun. It's always important to kind of adjust the air pressure because the air is really strong. If it's at full, this would be full strength, totally vertical. This is off. So I would adjust it to halfway on your hand to see, because when it's at full strength, it can actually tear through pretty thin work. Okay, so I'm just gonna take the air and gently pop the piece off. I see it's sticking just a little bit, so it might still be a little wet. I'm just going to loosen it up, then bring it back on. To the wheel and hit it with the heat gun again. Okay, so it's loosened up a bit. Be sure to clean up any scraps that like flying. Those scraps can go in the leather hard bucket. And then we're gonna go back and hit it with the heat gun. Okay, so I just heat gunned it a little more. And now you can see it has come off the mold really nicely. I'm just gonna put it on a new bat. Or you can take this off and just put it on the bat underneath, that's fine too. Be sure to clean up your mold and put it away so the next person using it has a nice clean mold. Okay, so now we're cleaning up the rim. It's super important that when you go to clean up the rim on the wheel, you have centered your plate or your bowl again. And I'm going to use this tool, the little grater tool, to even out the rim. It's also important to remember that you shouldn't be going at full speed, really. There's no need for that. And it might be helpful to grab a brush like this, because we cannot blow these boogers off the pot with our masks on, so we will just brush them off. taking a break to brush this off. If you notice any wrinkles in your slab that you put on, you can clean those up once you're done making a bunch of clay boogers, because if you introduce water to this pot now, all those clay boogers will stick to it. Also, just be cognizant that the more water you add to it at this stage, when it's kind of leather hard, the more likely it is to flop. So be really conservative with your water use. Okay, I can see I have a bit of a lop-sidedness in this, which I don't want. So I'm actually just going to pop it back on the mold. And compress the edge to retrain it to go back into that nice shape. And also now is a great time to kind of compress that edge you just made against the mold. That's also going to help it from potentially warping in the kiln. If you have a nice strong compressed edge, that's going to help keep it strong, keep its circular shape. Okay, so I'm just gonna hit it with the heat gun really quick. To kind of freeze that shape. And then to avoid having that warp, one way you can take it off is just to grab another bat, flip it, and then pull the mold up, and it should be pretty good. Okay, so now I'm going to just clean up this edge with a damp sponge, not a super wet one. And again, on plates, you want a nice curved rim, not super sharp rims, because they're more likely to chip the sharper they are. And I'm going to kind of compress out, well, crack, or not crack, but fold from the slab I see. All right. And then that's pretty good. Should look something like this. Kind of see that foot. Then you can let it dry, oops, underneath plastic. Probably, I would leave it under plastic tightly wrapped for one day and then begin to loosen it so it can kind of equalize a little bit, and that will help with mitigating warpage as it's going through the drying process.